And we're on the banks of the River Lag in Belfast city centre, and the landscape behind me, wholly unrecognisable, totally redeveloped since the days of the Troubles. And yet, in this city today, we have a funeral, a sender for a wonderful life cut short, 29-year-old Lyra McKee. And she was done to death by dissident Republicans, absolutely speaking the old language, the old ways of what we euphemistically call the Troubles. So this send-off today, two extraordinary things, as you said. First of all, a wonderful, enthusiastic, loving and inclusive ceremony and send-off for somebody who had absolutely that personality, but a dramatic and pointed message given face-to-face by the church to the political leaders.
Family, friends, colleagues gathered for a joyous celebration and send-off. But politicians too. The Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, the DUP and Sinn Féin, who refuse power sharing, forced into pew sharing by this cruel and pointless death.
I commend our political leaders for standing together in Cregan on Good Friday. I am, however, left with a question. Why, in God's name, does it take the death of a 29-year-old woman with her whole life in front of her?
A genuinely breathtaking, show-stopping moment. Watch how the party leaders, reluctant or otherwise, are dragged up onto their feet.
The death of a 29-year-old woman with her whole life in front of her to get to this point.
Father McGill, however, wasn't done yet.
One of Lyra's friends was reporting us saying this: "We've had enough. There's a younger generation coming up in town, and they don't need guns in their hands. They need jobs. They need a better health service and education. They need a life, not a gun in their hands."
Afterwards, Lyra's friends, only too willing to take up this theme, that their friend's violent death can, should, must shock politics here into action.
That's what the politicians need to learn from her, how to do that, how to have those difficult conversations. Just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean you can't find common ground.
Could I just say to Martin's point, when he pointed at the politicians and he said, make peace work, that's a message not just for the people of Northern Ireland, but Ireland's going to continue to lose its treasures, like Lyra, if people can't sort out peace here.
And in the political mainstream, many have long said the continuing suspension of power sharing in Northern Ireland is creating the vacuum in which the gunman can thrive.
There are many reasons as to why Lyra McKee was murdered, but none of them will be resolved by not having a government. We know from bitter experience in Northern Ireland that political vacuums are filled by people with guns.
I want to tell you a story about a conversation I witnessed in a mosque which changed my life.
This morning, Lyra McKee's family said this of her. She was someone who spoke to and made friends with anyone and everyone, no matter what their background.
The first lesson I learned about being gay was that it was evil and that I was going to hell for it. And I learned that from the Bible.
Her passionate TED Talk, a clarion call for LGBT awareness. She lived, she breathed inclusion. So it is that her Catholic family agreed to a service at a Protestant cathedral today, led by clergy from both traditions on paper. Led, in fact, by friends like Stephen Lusty recalling her emergency text messages.
I'm at a party. I've broken the tab on my last can of cider. You're an engineer. How can I get into it without losing the contents? Lusty, I'm talking to this cute babe, and she's a bit cross-eyed. How do I know if she's eyeing me up or not?
Her coffin left the city cathedral to sustained applause from thousands outside. Across Northern Ireland, the walls of Derry and the graffiti since her death makes its point over the old violent ways. In Belfast today, a funeral that embraced any sexuality, any religion and none, the new peaceful ways. Lyra McKee's coffin left to the applause of thousands gathered outside in an inclusive call for peace. The elegy for a brilliant life lost young. Alex Thompson, Channel 4 News, Belfast.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, George Hamilton. I asked him what he made of the words of Father McGill, who described Lyra's death as a doorway to a new beginning for Northern Ireland.
Well, I think it's a challenge for all of us to look at how we have stood together with a unity of purpose over this past 6 days. That's politicians, religious and civic leaders. People have come together to narrow the space that violent dissidents walk upon. They are not legitimate. They don't have any legitimacy within our society. And I think Father McGill's challenge to all of us, and in particular to the politicians, that really do we need the death of a lovely 29-year-old woman to bring us to this point. I thought that was a very powerful challenge from Martin McGill, and I think we all need to reflect as we continue this journey of the peace process and making Northern Ireland a better place for all of us and for the generations coming along behind.
Are things changing in response to the tragedy, not least, for example, in the response you've had to the investigation you're carrying out into her murder?
Yeah, well, we have had unprecedented support from the community. We've had people come forward with mobile phone video footage, providing witness accounts and giving all sorts of detail that is really quite important from an evidential point of view. But we haven't got to a threshold yet of being able to charge the people responsible. I'm confident, I'm certain that that evidence is available within Derry, within Craigan, and I'm appealing to people to come forward and work with us. I know people will be frightened by these thugs. I know they'll have concerns. I know that they may lack confidence in policing to some extent because of their experiences in the past. But my appeal is to come forward. We will work with you. We'll be sensitive to your fears. We want to work with you, and we want to respect the rule of law and bring those responsible for this horrible murder to justice.
Some of Lyra's friends have been putting red handprints at the headquarters of the dissident Republican group, Sarah. It's a powerful image, but are you nervous, perhaps, about the repercussions of that?
No, I don't think so. Clearly, you know, it was a very powerful image of that blood red paint and the handprints being daubed onto that building. Clearly, all of us need to operate within the law. The police can't go condoning criminal damage, but we had this in perspective. There was a very sensible police response to that. People knew what they were doing and they had a point to make, and I think it was made very powerfully. And I thought the images of those brave women and friends of Lyra's walking forward past the bully boys that were stood in front of them spoke volumes. It showed the bravery and the courage of those people in comparison to the thuggery and the coercive control that violent dissidents want to exercise on their own communities.
You've had the collapse of the Northern Ireland power-sharing government. We've had the threat of a hard border post-Brexit. Those two things taken together, how much more challenging have they made your job?
Well, clearly, I wish we had a devolved government, and it would also be helpful to have the Brexit issue resolved one way or other. But actually, we shouldn't conflate these issues around Brexit and devolution with violent dissident Republican activity. In no circumstances is there any excuse or legitimacy or justification for people taking guns onto the streets.
George Hamilton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Michelle O'Neill, Sinn Féin's deputy leader. I asked what her response was to Father Martin McGill's direct plea to Northern Ireland politicians to unite.
I think that Father McGill's comments were absolutely spot on. I think that he was right to lay down the challenge. I think that I can wholeheartedly agree that politics needs to work. I can wholeheartedly agree that Lyra McKee's murder is outrageous. And I can wholeheartedly agree that, and I hear it time and time again myself when I'm out and about in the community and engaging with people, they want politics to work, they want the Good Friday Agreement to work, they want the peace process to work, they want a locally functioning Assembly and Executive to work, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that that is the case.
So how are you yourselves going to respond to that challenge?
Well, we have never been found wanting in terms of trying to make the institutions work. We believe wholeheartedly in the Good Friday Agreement. Our peace process, and I think that Lyra's tragic death has actually brings into sharp focus why we need to protect our peace process and why we need to protect the Good Friday Agreement. We believe the way forward is that the two governments need to meet. They need to convene an intergovernmental conference, which is a mechanism within our agreements. They need to meet and they need to remove the obstacles and the barriers to having proper power sharing institutions working and an executive and an assembly, and they need to meet urgently in order to do so.
But you walked away from power sharing and you saw the response in the church. The public leapt to their feet when Father Martin McGill made his comment, his challenge to the politicians. The politicians were notably slower to stand up.
Well, let me say this. Sinn Féin believe wholeheartedly in making the Assembly and the Executive work for all people. We believe wholeheartedly in delivering equality and rights. Rights that citizens in England enjoy: marriage equality, language rights, legacy inquest rights. We need to see resolution on those issues, and we actually found a way forward. We negotiated a deal with the DUP, and the DUP reneged on that deal. They failed to deliver. So we find ourselves now...
You're doing what you've done for decades and what the public are impatient with. You're blaming the other side. Won't you now just unilaterally say that you will enter talks without any preconditions?
But that's not news. That's something that we've said consistently. I have been calling for a proper, meaningful talks process. And more than that, we don't just want to see talks for talk's sake. We want to see a resolution. We want to see restoration. We found a way forward with the DUP last year. And I don't say that for recrimination. I say that just to point out a reality. So in the absence of the DUP wanting to engage properly, the two governments, as responsibility, as co-guarantors of our peace agreement, can indeed meet, can indeed remove the obstacles. And that in itself opens up the way to have an Assembly and Executive up and running.
Since Lyra's death, you've been very vocal, telling the dissidents to pack up and end the violence. Yet every year you commemorate the Easter Rising, the moment when Republicans took up arms against the British. Do you think, will you acknowledge that there is a hypocrisy there?
Well, firstly, let me say this. Those people who carried out the murder of Lyra McKee have no support. They have no community support whatsoever. Those people that murdered Lyra McKee have no strategy, no policies. They have nothing to offer their community, only bringing hurt and pain to their community. They should leave the stage. They should disband. They should desist immediately. There is no equivocation there. And I as an Irish Republican, see no contradiction in me as an Irish Republican commemorating in a very dignified and respectful way. Indeed, that is part of the Good Friday Agreement, that we all have a right to remember our dead, and we do so in a very dignified and respectful way, and will continue to do so. But let's not equate that with the actions of people who have brought mayhem onto our streets, or the actions of people that have killed and left a family grieving for their daughter tonight.
Michelle O'Neill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cathy.